Okay, good morning everybody. My name is Jay Dunn, D-U-N-N, and we're here today to transfer $7,200,000 from the Alexander Gaston Trust to the Alexander Gaston Pearl Harbor Historic Sites Fund, Historical Sites Fund. That money, most of Mr. Gaston's money was inherited. I'll give you a little background about Mr. Gaston. He was born in New York City. He died in 2021 in August. Tomorrow, the 26th of October, would have been his 76th birthday. A coincidence. He moved to Connecticut, and that's him and I were in high school, in different high schools in Connecticut, and we both joined the Navy Reserves while in high school. I met him 58 years ago at the Navy Reserve Training Center in Stamford, Connecticut. After we graduated from high school, we both went to different colleges. He quit college. He said it was boring, too boring. So he went on active duty, sailed across the ocean on active duty in the Navy, went to Vietnam. He was in action there when they were being shelled from the shore by the North Vietnamese. Okay, now Sandy was a big patriot. He was a collector. He had quite a collection of art, sculptures, models, knickknacks, aircraft models, everything. He had thousands of books. He was an avid reader. He read thousands of books in his house. And one of the things, most of all, about Sandy, he was a patriot. And he often would talk about the kids today, that they don't know much about American history. And he would say that if you asked a child today, who was Chester Nimitz? Sandy said they'd probably tell you he's the guy that built the Nimitz Highway. So Sandy decided early on that these museums, these memorials, these museums and memorials behind me, including the Bowfin, are an excellent place to educate children. And think of it, when a child goes there and learns about the history, about our forefathers and what they endured, what they put up with, how they protected us, defended our freedoms. This is an ideal place to learn about that, for a child to go there. Think about that. That's an amazing thing. Okay, Sandy invited Lee and I over to his house one day to discuss his legacy. He basically was determining what to do with his wealth when he passed away. And I was not there at the beginning. I was at the Aviation Museum. I volunteer there. I was teaching children how to fly the simulators at the Aviation Museum. And this one little boy looked up at me and he says, "I wish my buddy Kimo could be here. He's my best friend." And I said, "Well, where's Kimo? What's the matter? Is he sick? Why isn't he here?" He said, "No, his mommy didn't have $30 to pay for the trip to the museum." So Lee and Sandy looked at each other. It was like an aha moment. They both determined, why should any child in Hawaii be deprived of going to these museums because of lack of dollars, lack of funding? And that's when Lee came up with the idea to make it kind of like the Weinberg Foundation. So the Alexander Gaston Pearl Harbor Historical Sites Fund, which will receive $7.2 million today, will become a place where the money is invested. The Bank of Hawaii is going to invest that money, and the money, the earned interest on that money, will be spent for the kids to go to these museums. Okay? At the end of the year, all the leftover money from that investment will be divvied out to these four entities here in Pearl Harbor based on participation by students. So the more students they get, the more money they're going to get. So it incentivizes them to get the students to visit the sites here in Pearl Harbor. Lee and I have come up with, if you look over here, there's a Pearl Harbor Fund.org. That's a website that Lee created, and on that site is a place you can donate money to this fund. So this fund can grow. Think of it, in the future, you're going to be able to fly kids from the neighbor islands here if you have enough money in this fund. So that's the gist of what we're doing here. And I'll turn it over to Lee Collins. He's the co-trustee.
I want to thank everybody for coming today. Sandy was a great man. He was one of my best friends. He was generous beyond most people's imagination. He loved Hawaii. And when a local child would come up to him and they'd say, "Hey, uncle," he would get the biggest smile. You think he just ate all the best candy. The reason we're here today isn't because of Jay and I and Sandy. It's really about you. It's about each one of you. It's about the Missouri and the Bowfin. It's about the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum. And it's definitely about the USS Arizona Memorial and the National Park Service. You guys gave Sandy this wonderful life. He spent the last 30 years, almost 30 years living in Hawaii. He divested everything on the mainland, moved here, bought a beautiful home, joined all the right organizations, joined the Navy League, and started volunteering. He volunteered at the Bowfin. He'd sit at the Missouri and hand out little flyers for donations at the exit gate. He did the same thing at the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum. And it gave him such pride and such honor. So I'm sure as he's looking down, watching us today, he's very, very honored. So again, thank all of you for coming. Thank Hawaii for giving my good friend this wonderful life. And he'll be so happy to see the children visiting Pearl Harbor. It's not about joining the military. Pearl Harbor is much more than just history. It's obviously history, but it's also science and math and social studies. It's a very broad educational experience. And when you bring children here, especially children who maybe struggle, it can change their lives, and Sandy knew that. The way the fund works is schools will apply for a grant with the Hawaii Community Foundation. And the Hawaii Community Foundation, working with one advisor from each one of the memorials, will approve that. The grant will pay for the school's transportation. They can use any transportation company they want. They'll pay the admissions to the memorials they want to go to, and it'll pay for their food. And so no child or their parents should ever have to reach into their own wallet to visit Pearl Harbor. That's the dream of the fund. And then the Battleship Missouri has an amazing program where you can actually spend the night. And they have a Pearl Harbor partner program that's visit Pearl Harbor, spend the day, stay the night, or something like that. I'm probably messing that up. But the experience is phenomenal. And they end that experience standing on the fantail of the Mighty Mo in the morning at 8 o'clock with the flags being raised, and the kids are standing at attention with their hands over their hearts, and it's one of the most amazing experiences ever. Real quickly, talking about the Hawaii Community Foundation, excuse me, we definitely would not be here today without them. We found that they are the organization that make legacies like this possible. When you don't have $100 million to create your own foundation, hire your own staff, build your own nonprofit, what you do is you contact the Hawaii Community Foundation. And they do all that for you for a very, very small fee. So we can't thank them enough for everything they've done for Sandy. So the way the fund works is the money goes to the Hawaii Community Foundation. It goes into a fund, and the Bank of Hawaii, Fred here's today, our Vice President of Bank of Hawaii, his team manages that fund. They invest it, makes a lot of money for the fund, and then portions of that proceeds are then used to write the grants. So the great thing about this is that initial $7.2 million and everything we add to it, and other people who joined add to it, the principal never is touched. And it continues to grow and grow and grow and provide more children this experience. And like Jay was saying earlier, one of the great opportunities to bring children from other islands. Because we know that some of our families on the other islands struggle. There's no way they're going to get here. The DOE doesn't have that kind of money, and this fund could possibly help with that. Yeah, excellent question. So one of the things that when we were talking about this, Sandy, Jay, and I, we wanted the memorials to get paid for each visit, not discounted, nothing, because that goes into their general fund where they can operate, right, and pay their staff. So that happens with every visit. And at the end of the year, let's say there's, example, a couple 100,000 left over, they'll look at how many children visited each memorial, and they'll divvy that up proportionally to each memorial. And again, that goes to the memorial. They put that in their general fund, and they can use that for anything they want. And hopefully this continues forever and ever.
Alyssa Lines, ELISSA-LINES, Executive Director, Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum.
I'm Michael Carr, C-A-R-R. I'm President and CEO of the USS Missouri Memorial Association.
So if you just want to take turns, I mean, what does this donation mean for you?
Well, this allows us to continue with and grow our education programs and bring kids to the schools. These last couple of years have been tough, but things are starting to grow again this year. And these monies will allow these programs to continue to grow, bring kids to Pearl Harbor, and teach them about, the story of the stories that happened here.
Correct. And, Mike is correct. I mean, for a lot of schools, the idea of taking a field trip and off-campus experience is just too expensive. They're not able to fit it into their budget, and this is a way to make it possible not only for schools and students here on Oahu, but involving and including all of the neighbor islands. This is just a tremendous opportunity, and as Mike said, it's not just the history of Pearl Harbor, it's the culture and it's the values and it's all of those things that were foundational as America was growing out of World War II. So it's very exciting.
Are there any opportunities from this fund you think that might be able to go into individual visits of kids, or is it just schools and organizations?
Well, I believe the language of the fund requires it to just be for schools and for students.
Yes, and when you think about it, if we've been underwriting and trying to bring as many students to the museums as we can, and this kind of support will allow us to also take a look at the investments that we make in our educational programs and the preparation that we make in order to welcome these students.
Sandy has always been a huge supporter of all of these programs, all from the very beginning. Sandy was actually the very first contributor to a fund to bring the Missouri to Hawaii back in 1995.
Right.
And over time, he became our single largest individual donor.
Right. Same with the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum. One of the things we know Sandy was waiting to do, and unfortunately his life ended before he could, was have dinner in the upper control cab of the control tower, which you can see behind us. We just got the elevator finished, and he believed deeply that these museums provide a foundation for growth and for future for our children. So this is important.
I was born and raised here, and I was lucky enough to go on some of these school trips, and they were some of my favorite field trips that we got to take. What does it mean to be able to spread this to some kids who might not have been able to get that opportunity?
Well, as Alyssa mentioned, being able to bring kids from Title I schools that don't have the funds, to bring kids from the neighbor islands. I remember a few years ago we had some funding from Hawaiian Airlines and brought some kids from Molokai. A number of them had never been off of Molokai. And so for them to be able to not only just travel, but to come and spend the night on the Battleship Missouri, go to the Aviation Museum and fly planes is really a life-changing experience.
Right. And the program allows us to partner together, which is the way it should be here in the Pearl Harbor. So we have applications from 950 kids from neighbor islands to come, and with the Missouri providing overnight, it's possible for the kids to come, spend a day, spend a night, and visit all of these museums at the same time. So working together, I think we can maximize the impact that Sandy envisioned.
Thank you.
All right, we're good.
All right. Thank you,
Cool.
everybody.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
There's a lot of money going on here, going out to these kids. Why is it talk about his history with the kids and why is this so important?
Well, Sandy, when he first came to Hawaii, he's been involved with children organizations all the time, especially through like Navy League or Rotary. So he has a history of bringing people here. Jay tells a story of when, 20 years ago, he comes out here to the Bowfin. There's a bunch of kids running around, and finds out Sandy paid for the whole thing to bring the kids here because the school just didn't have any money. So he's always had that affinity. He has this unquenchable thirst for knowledge. He reads just everything you could imagine. And he's very patriotic. He loved his country. And he loved the stories of Pearl Harbor and the courage and the commitment, the sacrifices. So he thought that should be shared with people so that they could remember the men who died here and learn of their stories. So that's kind
When
of...
did he pass?
He passed last year, 2021, August 19th.
And this is the first time he's given this much money or given money period? Or
This is the first time. We had to make sure that the estate, we took care of any outstanding issues to get us to this point, and we just finally finished doing his taxes for the first 2 years, and so we were able to write this check.
So 2000 what did you say, Tom?
2021.
Last question here. What do you think this will mean to him first time that kid, their class, is going to get on those ships and see those ships? And what do you think that's going to mean to him the first time that happens?
I think it's going to be one of his proudest moments, but I think a prouder moment.
I mean, he's up there, look, I believe people are
yeah,
up there
absolutely. He's
looking.
looking down. He's going to be very, very, very proud. But a prouder moment comes later when the children who come out here and they visited this because of his contributions, and it touches them and changes their lives in a better way. And they go on to do other great things in their own life. That is what it's really all about. And so he appreciated that. He understands that these experiences in a child's life shape them for the rest of their life.